Lena woke up before the sun even touched the sky. She was excited, the kind of excitement that made her legs feel light and her heart beat a little faster than normal. She was only 13, but she already loved traveling. Every trip felt like an adventure, and today was no different. Her father had arranged her flight because she needed to meet him in another city for a family event. He couldn't travel with her this time, but he trusted her. He always told her she had a quiet kind of strength, the kind that didn't need to shout to be seen. Her aunt stood beside her at the airport entrance, holding a small tote bag in one hand and her travel documents in the other. The airport buzzed around them with voices, rolling suitcases, and the endless steps of people rushing to somewhere important. Lena took it all in with bright eyes. She liked watching people, wondering where they were going and what stories they carried. "You ready?" her aunt asked gently. Lena nodded. Yeah, her aunt handed her the boarding pass. "You're in seat 2A, first class. Your dad insisted you should be comfortable." Lena didn't care about the seat type. She would have sat anywhere, even in the back where the noise was loudest. But she appreciated the gesture. Her father always made sure she felt safe while traveling alone. They moved through security, which went smoothly. The officer even smiled at Lena and told her to have a good trip. Once they reached the gate, the waiting area was already half full. People sat with travel pillows, headphones, and snacks they bought at the last minute. A few children played on tablets while their parents scrolled through their phones. Lena looked down at her boarding pass again. Flight 247, first class. Everything was set. When the gate agent called for first-class boarding, Lena stepped forward with her aunt. They weren't in anyone's way. They weren't rushing. They simply followed the instructions like everyone else. Right as Lena reached the entrance to the boarding tunnel, a woman wearing a navy blue uniform blocked her path. The woman's name tag read Ms. Reeves. She had a sharp look in her eyes, not mean exactly, but impatient, like she was already tired, even though the day had just begun. "Sweetheart, this line is for first class," Ms. Reeves said. Giving a quick glance over Lena from head to toe, Lena held out her boarding pass politely. "I know. This is my seat." Ms. Reeves didn't take the pass or even give it a full look. She simply shook her head and pointed toward the general boarding line. "No, dear. That line is for economy. You need to join that one." Lena blinked, confused for a moment. Her aunt stepped up. "She's first class," her aunt said. "Seat 2A. It's right here." Ms. Reeves crossed her arms. "Ma'am, I see a lot of passengers every day. I know when someone is in the wrong line. First class has already been checked in. Please don't hold up the line." She still didn't take the boarding pass, not even for a second. Lena felt her stomach twist. She wasn't used to being spoken to like that. Her aunt's voice remained calm, but there was a firmness under it. "Nobody is trying to hold up the line. Just scan her ticket, and you'll see she's in the right place." People behind them started shifting uncomfortably, not because Lena was causing a problem, but because they could sense something off in the way the flight attendant spoke. A few passengers exchanged glances, quiet but observant. Ms. Reeves gave a tight smile that wasn't really a smile at all. "Ma'am, please step aside. I will deal with this shortly." Lena looked at her aunt, unsure what to do. Her aunt gave her a reassuring nod, but her eyes showed frustration. They moved a step to the side, and Lena felt heat rise in her chest. She wasn't angry, just embarrassed. She didn't understand why the woman wouldn't even check the ticket. After a minute, that felt much longer. The flight attendant sighed and lifted her radio. "I need a supervisor at gate 12, she said into the device. The words made it sound like something big had happened. Even though all Lena had done was walk into the correct line with the correct ticket, she looked at the ground, wishing she could disappear for a moment. Her aunt rubbed her shoulders softly. "You didn't do anything wrong," her aunt whispered. "I know," Lena said. But her voice was tiny. When the supervisor arrived, he looked calm and friendly, the complete opposite of Ms. Reeves. He gave a polite nod to both Lena and her aunt before turning to the flight attendant. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked Ms. Reeves gestured toward Lena. "She's trying to board with first class, but the seat clearly isn't hers." "Did you check the pass?" he asked. I can tell just by looking, she said quickly, then added, It's obviously not correct. The supervisor raised an eyebrow. Let me see the ticket, please. Lena handed it over without hesitation. He scanned it, and immediately the small machine beeped with approval. Seat 2A, he said. It's valid, Ms. Reeves frowned. There must be a mistake. There isn't, the supervisor said gently. Her booking is confirmed. He stepped aside and motioned for Lena to board. Lena hesitated. She didn't want trouble. She didn't want to make anyone upset. But she also didn't want to let fear stop her from doing something she had every right to do. Her aunt squeezed her hand. Go ahead. Lena finally walked forward. For the first time in years, she felt small. Not because she was a child, but because she had been made to feel unwelcome by someone who didn't even try to understand the situation. As she began walking down the tunnel toward the aircraft, she heard whispers behind her. What was that about? Why didn't the flight attendant just check the ticket? Poor kid. Lena kept walking, trying her best not to let the voices affect her. Inside the plane, a warm, smiling crew member took her bag and guided her to her seat. The difference in attitude almost made her dizzy. This attendant treated her like any other passenger kindly, without judgment, without hesitation. You're all set in Tua, the attendant said softly. Let me know if you need anything. Thank you, Lena said. She sat down and tried to calm her breathing. The seat was comfortable, wider than the ones she usually saw when she traveled with her father. She placed her backpack under the seat in front of her and looked around. A businessman nearby gave her a respectful nod. Another traveler smiled at her as if to silently say, You handled that well. Her aunt stepped inside for a quick moment before general boarding started. She bent down beside Lena's seat. You okay? She asked. Yeah, Lena said, but she wasn't sure if it was true. You didn't deserve that, her aunt whispered. Lena nodded slowly. Why did she talk to me like that? Her aunt thought for a moment. Some people make decisions too fast. Sometimes they don't listen. But that's their mistake, not yours. Lena looked out the window, trying to let the bright morning light wash away the discomfort. She wanted this to be a good day. She wanted the journey to begin fresh. But the memory of the flight attendant's tone sat heavy in her. Thoughts as her aunt left the plane and the rest of the passengers started to board. Lena tried to focus on the little things she loved, watching the bags being loaded, listening to the soft chime of boarding announcements, feeling the gentle hum of the aircraft under her feet. She didn't know that people were still talking about what had happened back at the gate. She didn't know that more passengers had noticed than she realized. She didn't know that her father, miles away, would soon hear about it from someone on the airport staff who recognized her last name. All she knew was that she had been excited when she woke up, and now she felt something she didn't quite have a name for, something between confusion and disappointment. She tried to push the feeling away, because she didn't want this moment to shape her whole day. She closed her eyes for a moment and took a long breath. She reminded herself that her father always said, You know who you are. Don't let anyone else decide that for you. Those words helped a little. Passengers continued to walk past her to their seats. Some smiled at her. Some looked at her curiously, probably because they had seen what happened. She tried to smile back when she could, even if the smile didn't feel perfect yet. Just before the cabin door closed, Ms. Reeves entered the plane as part of her final checks. She glanced toward the first-class cabin and saw Lena sitting calmly in seat 2. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but she quickly hid it. She didn't say a word. She simply walked down the aisle, though her steps were slower now, and there was a hint of stiffness in her posture. Lena noticed, but she said nothing. She wasn't the kind of person to make someone feel small, even if they had done that to her. As the plane prepared for takeoff, and the cabin lights dimmed slightly, Lena looked out the window again. She wished her father were beside her, mostly because she knew he would have made her laugh and helped her forget the awkward start to her trip. But she also knew she would be okay. She always tried to be brave. She didn't know that this moment, this quiet discomfort, was only the beginning of something bigger. She didn't know that the truth about who she was would soon travel faster than the plane itself. She didn't know that the same flight attendant who stopped her would soon face consequences she never saw coming. For now, Lena just sat in her seat, holding on to the hope that the rest of the flight would be peaceful. She focused on the soft music playing overhead, the gentle murmurs of passengers settling in, and the calm promise of the journey ahead. And somewhere far away, her father was already on his way to greet her at the airport, completely unaware of the moment that had just unfolded, one that would reach him sooner than anyone expected. The airplane door closed with a soft thump, and the outside noise faded until it felt like the cabin existed in its own small world. Lena sat quietly in her seat, still thinking about what had happened at the gate. She didn't want to let the moment ruin her entire trip, but her mind kept replaying the scene. The way the flight attendant looked at her, the way she spoke, the way she refused to even check the ticket. She tried to shake it off. She looked around the first-class cabin and reminded herself that she belonged here. Not because the seat was fancy, but because her father had booked it for her. She had a right to sit where her ticket said she should. Still, her chest felt tight, the kind of tightness that made it hard to take a deep breath. A soft voice came from beside her. "Is everything okay?" It was the older woman seated in to be next to her. She wore a simple sweater and had gentle eyes that seemed to understand more than she said. Lena didn't know how to answer. She didn't want to complain or sound dramatic. "I'm okay," Lena said quietly. The woman gave her a kind smile. "You handled yourself well out there." Not everyone your age could stay that calm. Lena didn't know how to respond to that either, so she just nodded. She appreciated the kindness, even if it didn't erase the earlier moment. Soon the safety announcement played, and the plane began to move. The slow roll toward the runway sent a small vibration through the floor, and Lena could feel it in her feet. The engines grew louder, a steady hum that made the window glass tremble. She pressed her palm lightly against the window. She always loved takeoff. It made her feel like the world was opening up beneath her and anything was possible. For a moment, the excitement returned. The plane sped up, faster and faster, until her body pushed back into the seat. Then, with a gentle lift, they were in the sky. Clouds drifted past like soft cotton. The city shrank until it looked like a toy place where nothing could hurt her feelings. She let out a slow breath. The older woman beside her pulled out a book and settled in. Lena reached for her backpack and took out a small notebook her father had given her months earlier. She liked to write little things in it during trips, thoughts, drawings, ideas. Something about putting things on paper made her feel lighter. But today, she found herself just staring at the blank page. She didn't want to write about what happened. She wanted the flight to become something better. Something she could remember for a good reason. A few minutes later, a different flight attendant approached this one, younger. With a warm smile and a calm voice, "Would you like something to drink?" she asked. Lena looked up and returned a small smile. "Yes." "Maybe some orange juice, please." "Of course." The simple kindness in the attendant's tone helped dissolve some of the tension in her chest. She didn't feel judged. She didn't feel unwanted. She felt like a normal passenger again. The attendant returned with the drink, placing it gently on Lena's tray. "If you need anything at all, just let me know." Lena nodded. "Thank you." The attendant left, and Lena took a sip of the cold juice. It felt refreshing, like someone had turned down the volume on her worries. But across the cabin, she spotted Ms. Reeves walking slowly along the aisle. She was checking seatbelts and making sure everything was in order. When her eyes passed over Lena, a strange flicker crossed her face, something between surprise and discomfort. She seemed to avoid eye contact and moved on quickly. Lena felt a small shiver run through her, not out of fear, but because she didn't understand why the woman still looked bothered. Was it guilt? Annoyance? Embarrassment? She couldn't tell. She took another sip of juice, trying not to think about it. The flight smoothed into a peaceful rhythm. The plane leveled out, the cabin lights softened, and passengers settled into their seats. Some slept. Some worked. Some watched movies. Lena tried to distract herself by looking through the in-flight entertainment menu. She scrolled through movies but didn't feel like watching anything. She tried reading but couldn't focus. Her mind wanted to wander back to the gate, even though she wished it WOULD in single quotes. The older woman beside her noticed the way Lena kept shifting in her seat. "Do you like traveling?" the woman asked gently. Lena nodded. Usually, this morning was just strange. I saw what happened, the woman said softly. It wasn't fair. But you handled it with more grace than many adults would. Lena looked down at her hands. I didn't know what to do. Sometimes just staying calm is enough, the woman said. You didn't lose control. You didn't raise your voice. That speaks well of you. Lena felt the compliment settle in her chest like a warm blanket. She didn't realize it, but she needed to hear something kind. She needed to feel seen for the right reasons. She whispered, "Thank you." The woman nodded, then went back to her book, giving Lena space. The cabin dropped into a comfortable quiet. The engines hummed like a distant lullaby. Lena watched the clouds again, feeling the earlier sting fade with each mile the plane traveled. But halfway through the flight, something unexpected happened. Two pilots stepped out of the cockpit for a quick break, chatting casually as they walked to the small rest area near the front. Their voices were low, but the first-class cabin was quiet enough that Lena caught a few words. Owner's daughter, traveling today. The young one. Seat 2A, I think. Her father said she prefers to fly quietly. The words drifted to Lena like whispers carried on a soft breeze. Her heart skipped. They couldn't be talking about her. Could they? Her father always kept his identity low profile. He didn't like unnecessary attention or making people feel small around him. Only a handful of staff in the company knew what his daughter looked like. He liked it that way. He wanted her to have normal experiences, not special treatment. Lena didn't know if the pilots recognized her. She didn't know if they even knew her name. But hearing the words owner's daughter made her throat tighten. She wondered if they meant someone else. Maybe another child was flying first class. Maybe another family in the airline business was traveling today, but the moment one of the pilots mentioned Seat 2A, her breath quietly caught in her chest. Her mind raced. Did Ms. Reeves hear them? Was that why she seemed uneasy earlier? Did she realize she had treated someone important poorly? Lena wasn't sure how to feel. She didn't want fear or rank to play a role in anything. She didn't want people to treat her differently because of her father's job. She only wanted to be respected the way any passenger should be. Across the cabin, Ms. Reeves walked by again. This time, she moved slower, her eyes briefly flicking toward the pilots. Then she glanced at Lena again. Lena saw the moment it clicked. The moment Ms. Reeves connected the dots. The moment her posture stiffened and the confident air she carried. Earlier faded, the flight attendant looked away quickly. But the guilt clung to her expression like a shadow she couldn't hide. Lena turned back to the window. Trying to pretend she hadn't seen, she didn't want revenge. She didn't want anyone to get fired. She didn't want to intimidate anyone. She only wanted fairness and kindness. She whispered to herself, I just want everyone to be treated the same. An hour later, the cabin lights brightened a little when lunch was served. The younger flight attendant brought Lena a tray with a gentle smile. Here you go. Let me know if you need a different meal choice, all right? Lena nodded. Thank you so much. The attendant's kindness slowly washed away the tension, piece by piece. The food tasted good, but more than anything, Lena appreciated feeling like a normal passenger again. Across the aisle, few first-class travelers spoke softly about business, travel plans, or family. Their voices blended into a gentle background hum, something Lena found comforting. For a while, everything felt peaceful. But Ms. Reeves eventually returned to the first-class cabin with her clipboard. She pretended to be checking equipment, though it was clear she kept glancing toward Lena. Her movements were stiff, almost awkward. She stopped near Lena's row. For a moment she hesitated, as if deciding whether to speak, but she didn't. Instead, she turned away and walked back toward the galley. Lena didn't know whether she should feel relieved or uneasy. Part of her wanted the woman to say something, maybe an apology, maybe acknowledgement, but another part of her wanted to avoid the azusti, get a conversation entirely. She sighed and focused on her meal. After the trays were collected, the older woman beside her leaned slightly toward her. I think she realized who you are, she whispered. Lena didn't respond right away. She didn't want the attention. She didn't want the situation to become something dramatic. She doesn't have to treat me differently, Lena said softly. I just wanted her to check the ticket. "That's reasonable," the woman replied. "Basic respect is not too much to ask," Lena nodded. She didn't trust herself to say more. The plane continued its journey smoothly. Outside, the clouds thickened, then thinned, then stretched out like long sheets of white. Lena found comfort in watching them drift by. At one point, the pilot made an announcement saying they would arrive on time. The passengers murmured with relief, some stretching, some adjusting pillows. Lena closed her eyes again, letting the gentle movement of the plane calm her. But just as she began to relax into the peaceful silence, she overheard a quiet conversation happening behind her. Two passengers were whispering. "That girl in 2A? Did you see what happened at the gate?" "Yes. And now look. She's clearly someone important." "I heard the supervisor talking earlier. Her seat was confirmed without question. It's strange, isn't it? Kids shouldn't have to deal with that." Lena wished their voices didn't reach her ears, but they did. And every word made her want to curl into her seat. She didn't want to be the center of anything. She didn't want rumors or gossip. She just wanted to travel a little later. The younger attendant came by again, refilling drinks. She placed another glass of orange juice on Lena's tray. "On the house," she whispered. "Just because you deserve a good flight?" Lena smiled. "Thank you. Really." The kindness warmed her heart again, making the earlier sting feel farther away. As the hours passed, the cabin dimmed again for passengers who wanted to rest. The older woman beside Lena closed her eyes, her book resting on her lap. Others pulled blankets over themselves. Lena leaned her head against the window, watching the shifting colors of the sky as the sun began its slow journey downward. Something about the soft orange light made her feel steadier. She thought about her father, and what he would say if he knew what happened. She could hear his voice in her head. Calm, steady, protective. He would ask if she was okay. He would listen without interrupting. He would tell her she mattered. He would remind her that people's mistakes don't define her worth. She smiled faintly at the thought. She missed him. But she also felt comfort knowing she would see him soon. The plane began its slow descent not long after, and the cabin lights brightened again. People stretched, gathered their things, and prepared for landing. Lena checked her backpack twice, making sure everything was still inside. Her heart beat a little faster. But this time not from nerves, just anticipation. She glanced across the aisle and saw Ms. Reeves standing near the galley, fidgeting slightly with her uniform. The woman looked nervous, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the courage. Lena didn't look away. She didn't stare, but she didn't hide either. She was simply herself, calm, thoughtful, waiting for the plane to land. Soon the landing gear lowered, and the wheels touched the runway with a soft bump. The jet slowed until the cabin filled once more with regular airport sounds, voices, engine hums, and the faint clatter of luggage shifting overhead. When the plane reached the gate and the chime sounded, everyone began to stand up slowly. The older woman beside Lena smiled gently at her. "You take care, all right?" "I will," Lena said. "Thank you." "For being kind? Doesn't cost anything to be kind," the woman said. Passengers filed out row by row. When it was finally Lena's turn to stand, she gathered her backpack and moved toward the exit as she approached the front of the cabin. Ms. Reeves stood by the door, waiting to say goodbye to passengers. Her posture was stiff again, but something in her eyes looked softer, almost regretful. When Lena reached her, the woman opened her mouth slightly. It looked like she wanted to speak, but no words came. Instead, she gave a quick nod. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Lena nodded back. Then she stepped out of the plane into the bright lights of the airport hallway. She didn't see the small group of airline staff waiting up ahead. She didn't know they had been told the owner's daughter was on the flight. She didn't know her. Father's head of operations was among them. Already searching the crowd for her face, all she knew was that the strange, tense morning was finally behind her. And something bigger, something she didn't expect, was waiting just beyond the gate. Lena stared out the window, watching the workers on the runway move around in bright vests like tiny pieces on a game board. She tried to focus on them instead of the uneasy feeling still sitting in her stomach. Even though she was inside the aircraft now, surrounded by soft lights and quiet voices, it didn't stop the earlier moment from echoing in her mind. She didn't want to feel upset, but the memory of being talked down to wasn't leaving her easily. The flight attendant who had dismissed her earlier walked past again, this time without looking her way. Lena sat straighter, almost like she needed to remind herself again that she belonged there. Her ticket was tucked safely into the small pocket of her backpack. She had checked it twice already, not because she doubted it, but because she somehow felt she needed proof for herself. A man sitting across the aisle glanced at her, gave a small smile. It was the kind of smile grown-ups use when they want kids to feel reassured. It helped a little. At least someone wasn't looking at her like she had snuck in. She returned the smile, though only for a second before looking down at her hands. Her fingers kept tapping nervously on the armrest. She stopped every time she noticed, then started again, without meaning to. A new flight attendant approached. This one was younger, and her expression was relaxed, nothing sharp or tight about it. She leaned slightly toward Lena. "Hey there," she said softly. "Everything okay?" Lena nodded quickly. Too fast, maybe, but she didn't want to make anything bigger than it already felt. "I'm fine." The attendant's eyes lingered for a moment, as if she could see something in Lena's face that Lena wasn't ready to say out loud. But she didn't push. She just smiled warmly and continued down the aisle. That tiny moment brought a little comfort, like someone had placed a small light into a dark corner. As passengers settled in, the cabin grew quieter. People were arranging bags, adjusting seats, or flipping through the magazines tucked in the seat pockets. Lena reached for her water bottle and took a sip, hoping it would steady her. The captain's voice came through the speakers, deep and calm. Lena always liked hearing the pilot talk. It made every flight feel official, like things were going exactly as they should. He talked about the weather, the smooth flight expected ahead, and the different cities they would pass over. She listened carefully, letting his voice drown out her restless thoughts. Minutes later, the same supervisor from the gate entered the cabin. Lena recognized her immediately. Her heart gave a small jump. She wasn't sure why the supervisor had come into the first-class section, but she tried not to stare. She kept her eyes on her lap and pretended to adjust her seatbelt, but the supervisor noticed her. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and something shifted in the supervisor's expression. It wasn't anger this time. It looked more like confusion, or realization, or maybe a bit of regret. Still, she didn't say anything. She only paused for a second before continuing toward the front. Lena took a slow breath. Part of her wanted the woman to apologize. Part of her didn't want to talk to her at all. It was strange how someone could make you feel a certain way in just a few seconds, and the feeling could stay with you long after they walked away. Shortly after, a soft chime sounded, announcing the safety demonstration. Lena watched quietly as the attendants performed the routine steps she had seen many times before. But her attention drifted. Every time someone walked by, she tensed slightly. She knew she shouldn't care so much, but she didn't know how to stop her mind from circling back to the same thought that she hadn't been seen as someone who belonged. When the demonstration ended and the plane began to move, she closed her eyes as the engines hummed louder. The vibration under her feet grew stronger. She loved this part, the feeling right before takeoff. It always made her think about possibilities in new places. It made her feel like the world was bigger than any uncomfortable moment. The plane sped down the runway and lifted into the air. Lena felt the soft pull in her stomach, the gentle shift as the ground dropped away. She opened her eyes and smiled a little. No matter what had happened earlier, this part reminded her that she was on her way somewhere important, to see her father, to feel safe again, to be around someone who always made her feel valued. When the aircraft reached a steady altitude, the attendants began moving around again. The younger attendant from before stopped by Lena's seat with a tray in her hands. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked kindly. Lena nodded. "Juice, please." "Of course." As the attendant handed her the drink, she added in a quiet voice, "If you need anything at all, just press the call button. I'm right here." It wasn't a big sentence, but it felt like a soft blanket being laid around her shoulders. Lena nodded again, grateful. The man across the aisle watched the exchange with a thoughtful expression. He leaned slightly toward her after the attendant walked away. "You traveling alone?" he asked gently. Lena nodded. "That takes courage," he told her. "Not a lot of kids your age can do that so calmly." She didn't really know what to say, so she just whispered, "Thank you." "Your family must trust you a lot," he added. Smiling, "They do," she replied softly. "My dad booked the seat for me." "That's nice." "First class is a good place to be for a long flight." She nodded, but she didn't tell him why that comment felt heavy. He seemed kind, though, so she held on to his kindness rather than the earlier hurt. A little while later, as meals were being prepared, Lena noticed two attendants whispering near the curtain. One of them glanced in her direction. Her shoulders tensed again. She didn't want to imagine things. But the glances reminded her too much of the gate. She looked down at her tray table, pretending to be focused on her drink. But she couldn't help hearing small pieces of their conversation. Not all of it, just enough to know they were talking about a situation earlier. Her name wasn't mentioned, but she knew. She could tell by how their eyes flicked toward her for half a second before turning away. Then the supervisor approached. Lena's heart beat faster. She felt her throat tighten. The supervisor stopped next to her seat and stood there for a moment. Her posture seemed uncertain, almost hesitant. "Excuse me," the supervisor said softly. Lena looked up slowly. The woman took a gentle breath. "I wanted to make sure you were comfortable," Lena nodded, not trusting her voice yet. "I realized earlier, things may have come across the wrong way," the supervisor continued. "I should have handled the situation differently."
Oh.
It wasn't a full apology, but it was something. More than she expected, Lena nodded again. "It's okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure she fully meant it. She just didn't want to make a scene. She didn't want to hold on to anger either. She was too young to carry that kind of weight. The supervisor gave a small nod and stepped away. The younger attendant returned soon after, as if she wanted to check if everything was all right. She didn't mention the supervisor. She didn't mention anything that had happened before. She simply offered a warm smile. "Would you like a snack?" she asked. This time, Lena's smile was real. "Yes, please." As she ate, she finally felt her shoulders relax. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, and the hum of the engines blended with soft conversation around her. For the first time since the gate incident, she felt a little lighter. She rested her head against the seat and closed her eyes. She didn't sleep. She just let the sound of the plane fill her mind until everything else quieted. She thought about her father, about how he would hug her tight when she arrived, about how he would listen to the story and probably shake his head in disbelief. He would know exactly what to say to make her feel better. She imagined him telling her, "You handled it with grace. I'm proud of you." Those words alone, even in her imagination, eased something deep inside her as the flight continued smoothly. Lena slowly learned to let the earlier moment fade into the background. It didn't disappear completely, things like that didn't vanish so easily, but it no longer sat heavy on her chest. It became a memory she could hold gently, not something that pulled her down. She sipped her juice, looked out the window at the blanket of clouds stretching endlessly beneath the plane, and breathed in the peace she had been waiting for. The journey wasn't over yet, but for the first time that day, she felt like she was truly moving forward. For a long while, Lena sat quietly in her seat, letting the gentle motion of the plane keep her calm. The clouds outside looked soft and endless, like someone had spread out a white blanket across the whole world. Every time she looked at them, her mind felt a little lighter. She imagined bouncing on those clouds, sinking into them like pillows, forgetting everything that had bothered her earlier. But even as she relaxed, part of her kept noticing every small thing happening inside the cabin. The soft footsteps of attendants, the faint clink of glasses being arranged, the low hum of people talking, the small cough from someone a few rows behind. Every sound made her eyes flicker open again, as if she needed to stay aware. The man across the aisle had pulled out a book. He read quietly, sometimes glancing up to check the window or stretch his fingers. Lena liked that he didn't stare or act strange around her. His presence felt normal, almost comforting. It helped her settle into the seat a little more, She wrapped the thin blanket over her legs, tucking the edges near her feet. It was soft and warm, and the moment she leaned back, her shoulders loosened. For the first time in hours, she didn't feel like she had to prove anything. Not to the attendants. Not to the supervisor. Not to anyone. The younger attendant returned with a tray of meals. She smiled when she reached Lena, a genuine smile that made Lena feel seen in the right way. "Here you go," she said softly, placing a warm plate in front of her. "Let me know if you need anything else." Lena nodded gratefully. The meal smelled good, something simple, pasta with soft bread on the side. She ate slowly, savoring each bite because it made her feel grounded again, like things were normal now. She didn't rush. She didn't look around nervously. She just ate the way she would at home. After finishing, she took a sip of water and glanced around the cabin. Most passengers seemed relaxed. A few were watching movies, their faces lit up by screens. A couple spoke quietly to each other, their voices soft and warm. The lights inside the cabin were dim now, giving everything a calm and peaceful feeling. She loved this part of flying the quiet. The soft music playing from overhead speakers, the feeling of floating above the world. It made her feel like she had stepped into a different place where problems didn't follow you unless you carried them tightly in your hands. The supervisor had not returned. Lena was grateful for that. She didn't want another tense conversation. She didn't want more half apologies or explanations she didn't ask for. She just wanted to arrive safely and forget the ugly moment at the gate ever happened. Still, she couldn't stop thinking about it completely. She leaned her head against the seat and let her thoughts wander. She thought about the tone the supervisor used at the gate sharp. Dismissive, like she had already decided Lena didn't belong. She remembered the way the people behind her in line looked confused. When they realized the argument was over, something as simple as a ticket. She remembered how her hands had felt cold. How her voice had felt small, even though she wanted to sound confident. But she also remembered the moment. The younger attendant spoke to her. The moment the man across the aisle gave her a smile. The moment she stepped inside the plane and someone treated her like a normal passenger, not someone trying to prove anything. That made a difference. People could be unfair. People could make assumptions. People could hurt you without even thinking twice. But people could also be gentle. They could be understanding. They could lighten your heart with a small act that didn't even take a full minute. It made her wonder why some grown-ups chose the first way instead of the second. After some time, an announcement came through the speakers. The pilot spoke again, mentioning the weather ahead, a slight chance of turbulence, but nothing serious. His calm voice filled the cabin and made Lena feel safe. She liked knowing there was someone in the front who had everything under control. When the plane dipped slightly, few passengers gasped quietly, but Lena didn't mind. She was used to flying. She had flown with her father many times, and he always explained how planes moved, how air pockets worked, how dips and shakes were normal. So she held on to those explanations now, trusting them the same way she trusted his voice when he told her everything would be fine. A while later, the man across the aisle closed his book and stretched his arms. He noticed Lena watching the clouds again. "I used to look at them like that too," he said gently. "When I was your age," eyebrows lifted slightly. "Really?" He nodded with a smile. "They made me feel like everything was possible." "That's how they look to me," she said quietly. He nodded again, then didn't say anything else. It felt nice. He didn't ask for details. He didn't bring up what happened earlier. He just shared a little thought and let her be. That kind of kindness was subtle, but it mattered. Eventually, the cabin lights dimmed even further, signaling a rest period. Some passengers pulled their blankets higher. Others adjusted their seats or put on headphones. Lena did the same. She placed her backpack near her feet and hugged her small pillow to her chest. She tried to sleep, but sleep didn't come easily. Her body was tired, but her mind kept drifting. She thought about her father waiting for her, probably checking his watch every few minutes, maybe even pacing. He always worried when she traveled alone, even though he trusted her. He would be at the airport early. She knew that. He always arrived before the flight landed, so he could be there when she stepped out. She imagined his face lighting up when he saw her. She imagined the warmth in his hug. She imagined telling him everything, not because she wanted him to get upset, but because he was the one person she could tell anything to without feeling judged or questioned. Her eyes finally began to feel heavy. She shifted slightly and closed them. The sound of the engines became a soft hum in the background. The seat felt warm. The blanket felt safe, but just as she was drifting off, she sensed movement near her seat. She opened her eyes slowly. The younger attendant stood there again, holding a small cup of warm tea. She smiled kindly. "I noticed you were awake," she whispered. "This might help you relax if you want it." Lena felt touched. Small acts like this were meaningful, especially today. She accepted the cup with both hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome," the attendant said before walking away quietly. The tea smelled sweet and calming. She took tiny sips, letting the warmth settle inside her chest. It felt like someone had given her a piece of comfort she didn't even know she needed. As she finished the tea, she felt her body relax entirely. Her breathing softened. Her shoulders loosened. Her thoughts slowed. Everything around her felt gentle now, like she had finally stepped into a space where nothing could bother her. She closed her eyes again. This time, sleep came softly. It wasn't deep sleep, more like drifting in and out of small dreams. She thought about the clouds turning into soft beds. She imagined walking on them barefoot. She imagined her father waiting for her at the airport, smiling so wide she could see it from far away. She didn't know how long she slept, but when she opened her eyes again, the cabin lights had started to brighten. The sky outside was a beautiful mix of pale gold and soft blue, the early colors of morning. Passengers around her were beginning to stir. Some stretched. Some rubbed their eyes. Some checked their watches or phones. Lena yawned softly and pushed the blanket aside. The younger attendant approached again. "Good morning," she said quietly. Lena smiled. "Morning. We'll be landing soon," the attendant added. "How are you feeling?" "I'm okay," Lena said. And she meant it. "That's good. If you need anything before we land, just let me know." When the attendant walked away, Lena felt a warmth in her chest. Not just because of the tea or the sleep, but because someone had cared enough to check on her more than once. Someone saw her as a person, not a problem. She sat up straighter and watched the sky change colors. It reminded her that a new day was beginning, not just outside the window, but inside her too. A day where she didn't have to carry that earlier moment as heavily as before. The pilot made another announcement, mentioning that they would begin descending soon. People began preparing. Seat backs were lifted. Windows opened. Belts clicked. Lena reached for her backpack and checked everything inside. She didn't want to forget anything. She touched each item gently, almost like a little ritual. It made her feel ready. When the plane started descending, her stomach felt that familiar flutter. She loved that feeling. It made her smile without trying. As the plane lowered through the clouds, she could see the city below, tiny buildings, long roads, little dots that were probably cars. It looked peaceful from up high, even if it was busy on the ground. The wheels touched the runway with a soft thud. The plane slowed. Passengers released breaths they didn't realize they were holding. Some clapped softly. A few laughed. Lena closed her eyes for a moment. She felt relief, excitement, and a small ache in her chest that reminded her how long the day had been. The plane rolled to a stop. The seatbelt light turned off. Passengers stood, reaching for bags and stretching. Lena waited patiently. She didn't like rushing. She wanted to step out slowly, comfortably, without pressure. As she waited, the supervisor passed by again. This time her eyes softened when she saw Lena. She paused. "I hope your flight was comfortable," she said quietly. "It was," Lena replied. The supervisor hesitated for a second, then added, "Take care. You too." It wasn't a deep conversation. It wasn't a big moment, but it felt like closure. Something gentle, something enough. When it was finally her turn to leave, the younger attendant stood near the exit. She gave Lena one last warm smile. "Safe travels," she said. "Thank you," Lena replied softly. As Lena stepped out of the plane and walked through the jet bridge. She felt lighter than she had all day. The air felt fresher. Her steps felt steady. Her heart felt calm. She knew she was moments away from seeing her father. Moments away from the hug that would make everything right again. And even though the day had begun with someone doubting her, it was ending with her knowing exactly who she was, someone who belonged. Someone who mattered. Someone stronger than she realized. She tightened her backpack strap, took a deep breath, and walked forward into the bright morning light. Ready for whatever came next? Lena walked slowly through the jet bridge, feeling the gentle warmth of the morning air brushing against her face. After a long night in the sky, the soft brightness felt almost like a welcome hug from the world itself. She tightened her backpack strap and kept walking, her heart beating a little faster with each step. She knew who she would see at the end of the hallway. She could already picture him standing there, waiting like he always did. The airport hallway opened into the large arrival section, where people stood behind a silver railing. Some held signs. Some called out names. Some stood on their toes trying to spot familiar faces. It was busy, but in a comforting way, full of people who were waiting for someone they cared about. Lena spotted him before. She even realized she was looking for him. Her father stood taller than most of the people around him. His expression was soft, his eyes scanning the crowd with the same mix of worry and excitement he always had when she flew without him. The second his eyes landed on her, his whole face brightened. He didn't wave. He didn't call her name. He just smiled in a way she knew meant everything was fine now. She hurried forward, weaving around a few passengers until she finally reached him. He opened his arms without saying a word, and she stepped into the hug, letting herself sink into the warmth of it. His hugs always made her feel like no matter what happened, nothing could break her spirit completely. "You made it," he said quietly, holding her a little tighter. "I did," she said. Her voice muffled against his shoulder. He pulled back slowly and placed his hands on her shoulders, studying her face with careful eyes like he wanted to check she was really okay. "You tired?" "A little," she admitted. "Hungry? Maybe later? Did everything go smoothly?" It was a simple question. Light, casual, but she felt her chest tighten anyway. She looked down for a moment, twisting the strap of her backpack between her fingers. He noticed instantly. He always noticed. "Lena," he said softly, lowering his voice. "Did something happen?" She didn't answer right away. She didn't want him to panic. She didn't want him to get angry. She didn't want this happy moment to turn into something heavy. But she also knew she couldn't pretend nothing happened. Not with him. Not when he looked at her with gently worried eyes that always made her feel safe enough to speak. She let out a small breath and said, "Something happened at the gate." He didn't react with shock or anger. He simply tilted his head slightly, listening with full attention. She explained everything slowly, carefully. How the attendant stopped her. How she refused to look at the ticket. How she acted like Lena was trying to sneak into a place she didn't belong. How the supervisor treated her like she was wrong before even hearing her out. She told him about the people who watched, the way she felt her voice shrinking even when she tried to stay calm. She didn't exaggerate anything. She didn't add extra details. She just told him exactly how it felt. When she finished, she finally looked up. Her father was still quiet. His jaw wasn't tight. His eyes weren't filled with anger, but there was something different about his expression of stillness she only saw when he was thinking deeply. "Did anyone treat you kindly after that?" he asked. "Yes," she said quickly. "One of the attendants. She was really nice. And some passengers smiled at me. They didn't look annoyed or anything." He nodded slowly. "I'm glad you had some kindness too." She didn't know if he was still upset. His face didn't show much, and he wasn't the type to explode with anger. His anger was quieter, but deeper. He held things in until he figured out what the right thing to do was. He placed his hand gently against the back of her head, just for a moment. "I'm sorry you had to go through that when you were traveling alone. You should have been able to walk onto the plane without any trouble." Lena swallowed and nodded. "Let's get your bag," he said softly, "and then we'll go somewhere peaceful." They made their way to the baggage claim. He held her backpack for her now, carrying it by the strap as if its weight belonged to him instead of her. When they reached the carousel, people stood around the moving belt, waiting for their suitcases to slide down. Her father didn't say much while they waited. He didn't bombard her with questions. He didn't ask for the name of the attendant. He didn't demand more details. He simply stood next to her, quietly protective, quietly present, and somehow that made her feel better. When Lena's suitcase finally appeared, he pulled it off the belt with ease. They walked toward the exit together at a calm pace. Outside the building, the breeze felt cooler. Cars lined up at the curb. Drivers honked. People rushed in and out. But her father guided her to a quiet corner near the parking area where they could talk without noise swallowing their words. He placed her suitcase down and turned to her. "Thank you for telling me," he said gently. She nodded. "I know that wasn't easy." She shrugged lightly. "I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Someone made it a big deal for you," he replied. She didn't say anything to that. He took a slow breath, the kind he took when he was choosing his words carefully. "I don't want you to ever feel small because of someone else's behavior. You hear me?" She nodded again, this time with more strength. "What happened to you was wrong," he continued. "Not dramatic, not imagined, not exaggerated. Just wrong. And adults should know better." She liked hearing him say it. It made her feel like she wasn't overreacting. Like her feelings made sense, but he went on, "I also want you to know that not all people are like that. Some will surprise you with their kindness." "I know," she said softly. And sometimes, he added, "the best thing we can do is show that kindness matters more than the mistake someone made." She looked at him, curious. "What are you going to do?" she asked. He smiled gently, but there was a hint of something serious beneath it. "I'm going to handle it. But before I do anything official, I want to make sure you're okay emotionally. You're my daughter first. Everything else comes after." She smiled at that,